What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Nemo Propaganda here, and today we're going to check out the Brunoco Terra Class A tube amplifier 6L6 push-pull design. Let me get those main specs on screen so you guys can check that out. I'll tell you about the standout features, what makes this amplifier unique or special in my opinion, why I consider it a bit of a hidden gem, if you will. Now, I know you guys don't love my tube amplifier videos. They don't get as many views as my solid state amps or my subwoofer videos, but when I find an amp that can do the things this thing does for its price category, I got to let you know about it because I get questions about stuff like this in the comments all the time. I know people are looking for an amplifier that has the sound that the Brunoco Terra 6L6 has. So let's get into it. Let me tell you about standout features for it. By the way, of course, we're going to do this review the same way we always do. I'll tell you about those standout features, what the amp sounds like, speaker pairing option. I'll tell you if there's any caveats. We'll compare it to some other amps in and around this price, and then we'll wrap up the video. So standout features, look, this casework is crazy beautiful for this price category. This is about $3,400, and that is delivered to your door, at least to my address in the United States. It is. I checked, I went to their website. I did the checkout to see if there was any hidden shipping costs. There wasn't. This model does not have a remote control, but there is an optional remote add-on for like a couple $100 if you want to go ahead and do that. The knobs are very nice to interact with, but the casework, oh my goodness, look, my B-roll is not going to show off the beauty of this casework as it is in person. It reminds me a lot of the Platamon, which is another beautiful product that uses billet aluminum. The irony is both companies are from Korea. So I don't know, maybe Koreans just have an affinity for beautiful metalwork. I know I do, and I'm not Korean, so maybe it has nothing to do with that. I don't know. But this amplifier is also made in Korea, and that may be a standout feature for some of you guys. I know some people do care where the product's made, and I know it seems like a lot of you guys don't necessarily care where it's made, but you do care or like to see a product made in the same region where the company is headquartered. This company's from Korea. They make the product in Korea. You guys apparently like to see that. Personally, I don't think it's a big deal where stuff's made as long as it's high quality. Either way, this is a very, very nice piece. Look, there's a couple other things real quick. 4 ohm or 8 ohm taps around back. You can option it with 16 ohm taps at the time of purchase if you wish. You just have to let them know about that. There's no subwoofer outputs. There's no pre-outs, right? So if you're going to run a subwoofer, you're definitely going to use something like a REL T7X and just run it off the high level. But let me tell you what the darn thing sounds like, because there's a few characteristics of the sound. It does very well, and in some ways better than my $6,000 separates. So let's jump into it. Starting with the treble, very, very, very effortless, very natural. This treble is coming from an ink black background, guys. It sparkles, it has clarity, it has air, it has space, it has separation, and oh my goodness, when I say separation, it has a lot of space and separation that conveys a sense of distance in the soundstage and within the sound field, whether it be the width, the height, or the depth. The space is crazy on this amplifier and much better than my $6,000 separates. Now, of course, my $6,000 separates have their strengths as well. For example, much more power available. I have monoblocks, you know what I mean? But the airspace and separation that this amp was providing for $3,400, I'll be honest, it was closer to something like the Pathos Impul Remix Mark II that I had here in for review. That amp is about $7,000. So I'm just saying, guys, that's the level of performance I was getting here with the treble region. Let's talk about the mid-range. The mid-range, this trend continues, this trend of effortless sound, this trend of lots of air and space around everything. It just continues. Soundstage, again, in the mid-range, very large, very wide, very deep, very tall, very organic, very natural sounding, and again, sounding like it's just effortlessly coming from this ink black background. This amp is really, really good at that. If that's the type of sound you're looking for, you normally have to spend quite a bit more money to get it. The Pathos Impul Remix Mark II, for example, that's a great example of how much you generally have to spend to get that type of sound. And that amp doesn't have a whole lot more power either. I think that amp is about 38 watts a channel. This one's 20 watts a channel and about half the price. So I think it's a hidden gem. I really do. Let me keep going with these sound impressions before I get ahead of myself. I had a shot of espresso before filming this video, guys. I don't know if that was a good idea or a bad idea. Anyways, let's keep going. So moving down to the bass region, you would think 20 watts a channel is not enough to drive difficult loads or bass heavy speakers, but that was not the case here. This amplifier was able to drive most speakers I had to sufficient volumes in my room, which is on the smaller side at about 1,500 cubic feet. Now, if you listen at 95 dB, you have speakers that are bass monsters, 84 dB sensitivity, really hard to drive. Of course, you should never intentionally pair very difficult to drive loads to tube amplifiers or Class A amplifiers that are like, 10 to 20 or 25 watts, right? You should not intentionally do that. But if you want to buy this amp and you want to know that it can drive those loads, should you decide to play around with some other speakers, or maybe you have a set of speakers that are harder to drive that you might listen to occasionally, this amp could do it. I tested difficult loads using my ATC SCM11s, my CSS Crichton 1TDs. Those are both speakers that are harder to drive. The CSS 1TDs also have a ton of bass, and bass sucks up wattage quickly. The ATC SCM11 is a sealed design, not the most efficient, right? The amp was able to get that ATC SCM11 to fairly respectable volumes in my room, much louder than I prefer. Connecting something more efficient like the Platamon, which is 90 dB efficient, I think it might actually be 91. No problem. No problem at all. Plenty loud, guys. Plenty loud. Good bass control. And okay, let's get back to that air and space I was talking about. So the Platamon also has really good air, space, and distance. When you combine this amp with the Platamon, the soundstage becomes like truly beyond the speakers, truly beyond the room. Now, I have a third product here that also is really good in that arena. The Live Harmony DAC also is very, very, very good with air, space, and distance and just separation. Those three products in the chain, I'm going to go ahead and say I had too much space. I had too much separation. I had too much soundstage. The sound was lit too big. It was too big. It sounded like my room. I was in a room like 3 or 4 times the size. It was crazy. The sense of scale was off the charts. The imaging, it was like almost like too real, too natural. I don't know how else to describe it. Now, those are all products that are really, really good in that arena. And I think I might be unique. I think some of you guys might like that. I've never heard an audiophile say the soundstage was too big, or imaging was too good, or there was just too much space and air and separation. There was too much clarity within that mid-range, right? I've never heard audiophile say that. But when I combined those three products, it was crazy. I felt like I was listening to big horn speakers, honestly, in like a big room. Anyway, I digress. You get my point. The standout sound characteristic and what really makes this thing special is how effortless it sounds, how natural it sounds. Of course, it does the holographics. Yeah, it's a tube amp. But that air and spaciousness and effortlessness in the mid-range and in the treble, 20 watts a channel is very respectable power from a Class A amp. And just the way it conveys its soundstage in a way that is natural, organic, and large and effortless. I couldn't believe it. It was better than my separates that are $6,000. It was closer to the level of the $7,000 Pathos In-Pole Remix Mark II that I reviewed last year. That's the truth, guys. That's the truth. That's why I consider it a hidden gem. Now, let's compare it to some other amps. So let's compare it to the Prima Luna Evo 100. That's about $2,800. This is $3,400. Kind of a big price difference there. Both amps are nice. Both amps are built well. The Prima Luna is made in America. The Brunoco Terra is made in Korea. So both amps are made in the country their companies are headquartered in. The Prima Luna does have a remote control. The remote control is an option. It adds a couple hundred, so figure $3,600 if you want it with the remote. So about $800 difference, right? Look, the Prima Luna Evo 100 is a good amp. Don't get me wrong, but the casework on the Brunoco Terra is truly on another level, right? It costs more money. That should be no surprise. But also, despite the wattage difference, like the Prima Luna Evo 100 claims 40 watts a channel, Brunoco Terra claims 20 watts a channel. The Brunoco Terra is the more powerful. In real world use, the Brunoco Terra brought more current driving capability to the table. It was able to play speakers louder, with more confidence, control the bass better, have more refinement, more air, more space, whether it be the mid-range, the treble, the bass, it didn't matter. Both amplifiers do the holographics thing. They're both tube amps, right? The Evo 100 was a little bit more forward in the treble region, where the Brunoco Terra was a little bit more natural and quite a bit more refined and effortless. The mid-range on both is really good, but when it comes to staging, I just told you guys the Brunoco Terra is closer to that $7,000 pathos. The Prima Luna Evo 100 is not on this level. This is like a boutique brand. They're making very high-end products at very affordable prices considering their performance. Moving down to the bass region, again, despite the Prima Luna having 40 watts and the Brunoco having 20 watts, I found the Brunoco to be able to drive the bass on speakers more effectively and with more control, and just it seemed like it had more power to it. It just did. So that's that comparison out of the way. Let's talk about the Wilsonton R300. That amp is about, I think, $15.99 when you buy it on Amazon. You can get it for less if you buy directly from China Hi-Fi, but most of you guys are buying it on Amazon because you want to make sure you have that in-home trial or the ability to return it if you don't like it. So $1,600 for the Wilsonton, $3,400 for the Brunoco. Big difference, guys, big difference. Yes, I know, but sometimes it's important to know what you can expect when you spend more, right? Or should you spend less? Is it better to spend less, right? So Wilsonton R300, great amp, but I saw a lot of comments. Those people ended up becoming very toxic, so I had to delete them. But a lot of people were saying that there was a lot of reliability issues, right? I did some research on the Wilsonton stuff, and sure, I did find some posts where there was some reliability issues. And I'll just go ahead and say this. That's kind of going to happen at some point. When a company's trying to hit a price point, that just might happen, right? That just might happen. They're cranking out more of them. They're mass produced. It is what it is, right? The Brunoco Terra, again, this is more of like a specialty piece. This is more made like a nice high-end watch. It's handmade by one guy. Like, it's going to be rock solid. They're using more expensive parts inside. The amp costs almost 3 times the price. That's no surprise, right? But let's talk about the tonal differences. The Wilsonton R300 is a great sounding amp for its price category. It sounds very good, very warm, but it's a lot more romantic. It's a lot more colored sounding than the Brunoco Terra. The Brunoco Terra is going to sound more accurate by direct comparison. But if we're talking about imaging, staging, resolution, refinement, the Brunoco Terra is simply on another level, bringing much more resolution to the table in a more natural way, in a way that is easier on the ears, in a way that sounds more effortless, in a way that has more air and space around literally everything. It does not make sense, guys, to compare the Wilsonton R300 to the Brunoco Terra. The Brunoco Terra is leaps and bounds on another level. It just doesn't make sense. Easy win, Brunoco Terra. Let's talk about the Galleon. What is it? The TS, the new one. I just reviewed it. Sorry, guys. I freestyle these videos. Sometimes I forget the name of stuff. It's not the TS120 SE. That was the old one I reviewed. EL34. Look, it was the EL34 one. Maybe it's called TS34. Whatever. Look, it is, I want to say 3150, right? Once you account for the shipping and everything. This is 3400 shipped. Some key differences. The Galleon ships with a remote. The remote with this is an option, another couple hundred. By the way, same with the Wilsonton. The Wilsonton comes with a remote. On this, it's an option. Galleon has subwoofer outputs. The Brunoco Terra does not. Galleon has 25 watts. Brunoco Terra has 20 watts. Different tube complements, right? The Galleon's EL34. This is 6L6 push-pull. Both amps, though, have no problem with driving current, driving loads, playing loud. They both brought that to the table without a doubt. Let's talk about the tonal differences. The Galleon EL34 amp seemed just a little bit more forward in the treble region, where the Brunoco Terra seemed more neutral and quite a bit more effortless, actually. And it still had a little more space, a little more air, and a little more refinement in the treble region. Moving down to the mid-range, both amps are tube amps. Of course, they brought the holographics, the organics, the tonal richness, so on and so forth. Both really good there. The difference is the EL34 Galleon had a little bit of weightiness to it, right? Whereas the Brunoco Terra was very light and airy with a lot of space and expansiveness. Two very different mid-ranges, both really good, just voiced differently. Again, EL34 more weight to it in the mid-range. Brunoco Terra more air, space separation, distance, and expansiveness to it. Both on the warmer side of neutral, of course. Moving on to the bass, look, both amps have good, large, powerful transformers inside, and we're able to control the woofers of most reasonable loads without any issues. However, I would not intentionally, as I've already said, I would not intentionally pair a very difficult to drive speaker, something like 84, 85 dB, to a tube amplifier. I just wouldn't do that. I would recommend about 87 dB, absolute minimum. If you can, 88, 89 dB. If you're at 90 or higher, you are totally winning. You're going to get a beautiful sound. So that's comparisons out of the way. What did I notice when I connected it to speakers? So I used my Platinums. I told you that. I used my CSS Crichton 1 TDs. I used my ETC SCM11s, my Bucard S400 Mark IIs. Guys, everything I connected to the speaker, this amplifier gave that speaker more air, space, and separation. And some speakers could use some of that, like the Bucard S400 Mark II is one of my favorite speakers. I love it. But it's not a champion when it comes to separation. It's not a champion when it comes to air and space. In fact, there are a few other speakers in and around its price category that have quite a bit more air and space to their presentation than the Bucard S400 Mark II. It's mid at best at those characteristics. But paired with the Brunoco Terra, man, this was a fantastic sound. I really enjoyed it. I couldn't find a bad pairing, honestly, guys. Everything I connected to it sounded fantastic. So that's pretty much bringing us to the tail end of this video, and I'll leave you with this. Just wrapping up the whole thing. It's a tube amp. It does all the great things tube amps are known for, and on top of that, really, really, really good air, space, and expansiveness that conveys a sense of distance and just effortlessness to the whole presentation. That's the standout characteristic of that amplifier. If that's what you look for in the sound, or you're looking to improve that part of your sound in your home, you may want to consider the Brunoco Terra 6L6 push-pull. If you got any questions, guys, this YouTube channel does have a free Discord, or you can ask your question in the YouTube comments below. Until next time, take care.